Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. Got a little news for you. A very dear friend of mine, Braj Balaba, is in the process of taking the sound out of these recordings and making them into podcasts, which just gives us another dimension of how to spread the readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. I'll have more news when we actually get it published and out there. I'll let you know. But it will be very good because some people will want to, while they're running or while they're doing something else, they can just, listen to through their device to the podcast, and it'll be great. That's news. More news is that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he loved the CC. So much so that he said this: if you think there's big problems with the coronavirus going around the earth, pandemic, listen to this. In due course, Mahapralaya, devastating floods, will inundate the entire universe. If you attempt to survive by swimming in that deluge, then do not neglect to take hold of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Sri Caitanya-caritämrta. I just want to pause here. This is the truth. Gita, Bhagavatam, and Caitanya-caritämrta, they're all equally important. And Bhagavad Gita isn't just for beginners, it's for everybody. And therefore you see the verses appearing all through the Caitanya-caritämrta. Or if you cannot hold all three, this is the poetic device, then release Bhagavad Gita. Don't really release Bhagavad Gita physically. This is poetic. If necessary, you may also relinquish Srimad Bhagavatam. You never want to relinquish Bhagavatam physically. But again, it's poetic. But under no circumstances release your hold on Srimad Bhagavatam. Sri Caitanya-caritämrta. That's absolute. Never release your hold on Sri Caitanya-caritämrta. For if this one book remains, then the flood can do no actual damage. Because after it has subsided, the message of Shastra can be revived from Sri Caitanya-caritämrta alone, it being the essence of all Shastra. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. So we've reached Caitanya-caritämrta Ädi-lilä, chapter 7, the Panchatattva, the glories of the Panchatattva. Okay. Now this is describing the events that led up to Lord Chaitanya meeting the Mayavadi sannyasis. We're beginning in text 40. Ädi-lilä, chapter 7, beginning with text 40. While Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was passing through Varanasi on his way to Vrindavan, the Mayavadi sannyasi philosophers blasphemed against him in many ways. Purport. While preaching Krishna consciousness with full vigor, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu faced many Mayavadi philosophers. Similarly, we are also facing opposing swamis, yogis, impersonalists, scientists, philosophers, and other mental speculators, and by the grace of Lord Krishna, we successfully defeat all of them without difficulty. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Text 41. Prabhupada wanted us to learn how to do that, The blasphemers said, although a sannyasi, he does not take interest in the study of Vedanta, but instead always engages in chanting and dancing in Sankirtan. Purport. Fortunately or unfortunately, we also meet such Mayavadis who criticize our method of chanting and accuse us of not being interested in study. They do not know that we have translated volumes and volumes of books into English, and that the students in our temples regularly study them in the morning, afternoon, and evening. Did you hear that, everybody? Out there in ISKCON land? We regularly study them in the morning, afternoon, and evening. We are writing and printing books, and our students study them and distribute them all over the world. No Mayavadi school can present as many books as we have. Nevertheless, they accuse us of not being very fond of study. Such accusations are completely false. But although we study, we do not study the nonsense of the Mayavadis. Mayavadi sannyasis neither chant nor dance. Their technical objection is that this method of chanting and dancing is called tauryatrika, which indicates that a sannyasi should completely avoid such activities and engage his time in the study of Vedanta. Actually, such men do not understand what is meant by Vedanta. In the Bhagavad Gita 15:15, Krishna says, Vedaish chasarvair aham eva vedyo, Vedanta krid, Vedavid eva chaham. By all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. Lord Krishna is the actual compiler of Vedanta, and whatever he speaks is Vedanta philosophy. Although they are lacking the knowledge of Vedanta presented by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the transcendental form of Srimad Bhagavatam, the Mayavadis are very proud of their study, foreseeing the bad effects of their presenting Vedanta philosophy in a perverted way. Srila Vyasadeva compiled Srimad Bhagavatam as a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. Srimad Bhagavatam is Bhashyoyam Brahma Sutra Nam. In other words, all the Vedanta philosophy in the aphorisms of the Brahma Sutra is thoroughly described in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. Thus, the factual propounder of Vedantic philosophy is a Krishna-conscious person who always engages in reading and understanding the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and teaching the purport of these books to the entire world. The Mayavadis are very proud of having monopolized the Vedanta philosophy, but devotees have their own commentaries on Vedanta, such as Srimad Bhagavatam and others written by the Acharyas. The commentary of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas is the Govinda Bhashya. You know, the Govinda Bhashya, when Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur was petitioned by the Gaudiya Vaishnavas in Jaipur that they weren't allowed to worship Govindaji, the deity of Rupa Goswami, and other ways of discrimination were going on. But Vishwanath was old at that time, and he couldn't travel. So he sent Baladev Vidyabhushan. And Baladev Vidyabhushan went there, and he was confronted by these Mayavadis. They call them the anti-party. And they challenged him. You have to have a commentary, direct commentary on Vedanta Sutra. Because the Gaudiya Vaishnavas don't, we have the Srimad Bhagavatam. So we don't need a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. We come in the line of Madhvacharya. in his... Anyway, so Baladev Vidyabhushan said, yes, we have our commentary on Vedanta Sutra, but you have to give me a few days to get it. I have to retrieve it. So they said, all right. So he went to Govinda, and Govinda said, don't worry, I will dictate to you. And he took directly from Govindaji the Govinda Bhasha, and then completely tied the anti-party into knots and saved the Sampradaya. For that, Prabhupada was so impressed with that service that he dedicated, in case, I don't know the last time you read the dedication of the Bhagavad Gita as it is, but it's dedicated to Baladev Vidyabhushan. That was such a big service. So now, Baladev Vidyabhushan's name in print is traveling all over the world in glorification by the grace of Prabhupada. So, on with the purport. The Mayavadi's accusation that devotees do not study Vedanta is false. The Mayavadis do not know that chanting, dancing, and preaching the principles of Srimad Bhagavatam, called Bhagavad Dharma, are the same as studying Vedanta. Since they think that reading Vedanta philosophy is the only function of a sannyasi, and they did not find Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu engaged in such direct study, they criticized the Lord. Sripad Shankaracharya has given special stress to the study of Vedanta philosophy. Vedanta Vakyeshu Sada Ramana Kaupinavanta Kalau Bhagyavanta. A sannyasi accepting the renounced order very strictly and wearing nothing more than a loincloth should always enjoy the philosophical statements in the Vedanta Sutra. Such a person in the renounced order is to be considered very fortunate. The Mayavadis in Varanasi blasphemed Lord Chaitanya because his behavior did not follow these principles. Lord Chaitanya, however, bestowed his mercy upon these Mayavadi sannyasis and delivered them by means of his Vedanta discourses with Prakashananda Saraswati and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Text 42. This Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is an illiterate sannyasi and therefore does not know his real function. Guided only by his sentiments, he wanders about in the company of other sentimentalists. Purport. Foolish Mayavadis, not knowing that the Krishna consciousness movement is based on a solid philosophy of transcendental science, superficially conclude that those who dance and chant do not have philosophical knowledge. Those who are Krishna conscious actually have full knowledge of the essence of Vedanta philosophy, for they study the real commentary on the Vedanta philosophy, Srimad Bhagavatam, and follow the actual words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as found in Bhagavad Gita as it is. After understanding the Bhagavad philosophy, or Bhagavad Dharma, they become fully spiritually conscious or Krishna conscious, and therefore their chanting and dancing is not material, but is on the spiritual platform. Although everyone admires the ecstatic chanting and dancing of the devotees, who were therefore popularly known as the Hare Krishna people, Mayavadis cannot appreciate these activities because of their poor fund of knowledge. Text 43. Hearing all this blasphemy, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu merely smiled to himself, rejected all these accusations, and did not talk with the Mayavadis. Purport. As Krishna conscious devotees, we do not like to converse with Mayavadi philosophers simply to waste valuable time. But whenever there is an opportunity, we impress our philosophy upon them with great vigor and success. 44. Thus, neglecting the blasphemy of the Varanasi Mayavadis, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu proceeded to Mathura, and after visiting Mathura, he returned to meet the situation. Purport. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not talk with the Mayavadi philosophers when he first visited Varanasi, but he returned there from Mathura to convince them of the real purport of Vedanta. 45. This time, Lord Chaitanya stayed at the house of Chandrasekhar, although he was regarded as a Shudra or Kayastha, for the Lord, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is completely independent. Purport. Lord Chaitanya stayed at the house of Chandrasekhar, a clerk, although a sannyasi is not supposed to reside in a Shudra's house. 500 years ago, especially in Bengal, it was the system that persons who were born in the families of Brahmanas were accepted as Brahmanas, and that all those who took birth in other families, even in the higher castes, namely the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, were considered Shudras, non-Brahmanas. Therefore, although Sri Chandrasekhar was a clerk from a Kayastha family in Upper India, he was considered a Shudra. Similarly, Vaishyas, especially those of the Suvarnavanik community, were accepted as Shudras in Bengal, and even the Vaidyas, who were generally physicians, were also considered Shudras. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, however, did not accept this artificial principle, which was introduced in society by self-interested men, and later the Kayasthas, Vaidyas, and Vaniks all began to accept the sacred thread, despite objections from the so-called Brahmanas. Before the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Suvarnavanik class was condemned by Balal Sen, who was then the king of Bengal, due to a personal grudge. In Bengal, the Suvarnavanik class are always very rich, for they are bankers and dealers in gold and silver. Therefore, Balal Sen used to borrow money from a Suvarnavanik banker. Balal Sen's bankruptcy later obliged the Suvarnavanik banker to stop advancing money to him, and thus Balal Sen became angry and condemned the entire Suvarnavanik society as belonging to the Shudra community. He tried to induce the Brahmanas not to accept the Suvarnavaniks as followers of the instructions of the Vedas under the Brahminical directions. But although some Brahmanas approved of Balal Sen's actions, others did not. Thus the Brahmanas also became divided amongst themselves, and those who supported the Suvarnavanik class were rejected from the Brahmana community. At present day, the same biases are still being followed. There are many Vaishnava families in Bengal whose members, although not actually born Brahmanas, act as acharyas by initiating disciples and offering the sacred thread as enjoined in the Vaishnava Tantras. For example, in the families of Thakur Raghunandana Acharya, Thakur Krishnadas, Navani Hoda, and Rasikananda Dev, a disciple of Shyamananda Prabhu, the sacred thread ceremony is performed, as it is for the caste Goswamis, and this system has continued for the past 300 to 400 years. Accepting disciples born in Brahmana families, they are bona fide spiritual masters who have the facility to worship the Shalagram Shila, which is worshipped with the deity. As of this writing, Shalagram Shila worship has not yet been introduced in our Krishna consciousness movement, but soon it will be introduced in all our temples as an essential function of Archana Marg, deity worship. Text 46. As a matter of principle, Lord Chaitanya regularly accepted his food at the house of Tapan Mishra. He never mixed with other sannyasis, nor did he accept invitations from them. Purport. This exemplary behavior of Lord Chaitanya definitely proves that a Vaishnava sannyasi cannot accept invitations from Mayavadi sannyasis or intimately mix with them. Text 47. When Sanatana Goswami came from Bengal, he met Lord Chaitanya at the house of Tapan Mishra, where Lord Chaitanya remained continuously for 2 months to teach him devotional service. Purport. Lord Chaitanya taught Sanatana Goswami in the line of disciplic succession. Sanatana Goswami was a very learned scholar in Sanskrit and other languages, but until instructed by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he did not write anything about Vaishnava behavior. His very famous book, Hari Bhakti Bilas, which gives directions for Vaishnava candidates, was written completely in compliance with the instructions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In this Hari Bhakti Bilas, Sri Sanatana Goswami gives definite instructions that by proper initiation, by a bona fide spiritual master, one can immediately become a Brahmana. In this connection he says, Yata kanchanatam yati kanksyam rasta vidanataha tata diksha vidanena dvijatvam jayate nrinam. As bell metal is turned to gold when mixed with mercury in an alchemical process, so one who is properly trained and initiated by a bona fide spiritual master immediately becomes a Brahmana. Sometimes those born in Brahmana families protest this, but they have no strong arguments against this principle. By the grace of Krishna and his devotee, one's life can change. This is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam by the words Chahati Bandham and Shuddhanti. Chahati Bandham indicates that a living entity is conditioned by a particular type of body. The body is certainly an impediment, but one who associates with a pure devotee and follows his instructions can avoid this impediment and become a regular Brahmana by initiation under his strict guidance. Srila Jiva Goswami states how a non-Brahmana can be turned into a Brahmana by the association of a pure devotee. Prabhavishname Namaha. Lord Vishnu is so powerful that he can do anything he likes. Therefore, it is not difficult for Vishnu to change the body of a devotee who is under the guidance of a pure devotee of the Lord. Text 48. On the basis of scriptures like Srimad Bhagavatam, which reveal these confidential directions, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed Sanatana Goswami regarding all the regular activities of a devotee. Purport. In the Parampara system, the instructions taken from the bona fide spiritual master must also be based on revealed Vedic scriptures. One who is in the line of disciplic succession cannot manufacture his own way of behavior. There are so many so-called followers of the Vaishnava cult in the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who do not scrupulously follow the conclusions of the Shastras, and therefore they are considered to be apa sampradaya, which means outside of the sampradaya. Some of these groups are known as Aul, Aula, Baula, Kartabhaja, Nedha, Dadavesha, Sani, Sahaja, Sakhibeki, Smarta, Jatagosai, Ativadi, Chudadhari, and Gauranga Nagari. In order to follow strictly the disciplic succession of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, one should not associate with these apasampradaya communities. One who is not taught by a bona fide spiritual master cannot understand the Vedic literature. To emphasize this point, Lord Krishna, while instructing Arjuna, clearly said that it was because Arjuna was his devotee and confidential friend that he could understand the mystery of the Bhagavad Gita. It is to be concluded, therefore, that one who wants to understand the mystery of revealed scriptures must approach a bona fide spiritual master, hear from him very submissively, and render service unto him. Then the import of the scriptures will be revealed. It is stated in the Vedas, Shvetashvatara Upanishad 6.23, Yasya Devi Pada Bhaktir Yata Devi Tata Garo Tasyaite Caitanya-caritämrta Prakashante Mahatmanaha. The real import of the scriptures is revealed to one who has unflinching faith in both the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the spiritual master. Srila Narottam Das Thakur advises, Sadhu Shastra Guru Bhakya Hridaye Kariya Aikya. The meaning of this instruction is that one must consider the instructions of the sadhu, the revealed scriptures, and the spiritual master in order to understand the real purpose of spiritual life. Neither a sadhu, saintly person, or Vaishnava, nor a bona fide spiritual master says anything that is beyond the scope of the sanction of the revealed scriptures. Thus, the statements of the revealed scriptures correspond to those of the bona fide spiritual master and saintly persons. One must therefore act with reference to these three important sources of understanding. Text 49. While Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was instructing Sanatana Goswami, both Chandrasekhar and Tapan Mishra became very unhappy. Therefore they submitted an appeal unto the lotus feet of the Lord. 50. How long can we tolerate blasphemy of your critics against your conduct? We should give up our lives rather than hear such blasphemy. Purport. One of the most important instructions by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu regarding regular Vaishnava behavior is that a Vaishnava should be tolerant like a tree and submissive like grass. Trinadapi sunichena turodapi sahishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sada hari. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Nevertheless, the author of these instructions, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, did not tolerate the misbehavior of Jagai and Madai. When they harmed Lord Nityananda Prabhu, he immediately became angry and wanted to kill them, and it was only by the mercy of Lord Nityananda Prabhu that they were saved. One should be very meek and humble in his personal transactions, but if insulted, a Vaishnava should be tolerant and not angry. But if there is blasphemy against one's guru or another Vaishnava, one should be as angry as fire. This was exhibited by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One should not tolerate blasphemy against a Vaishnava, but should immediately take one of three actions. If someone blasphemes a Vaishnava, one should stop him with arguments and higher reason. If one is not expert enough to do this, he should give up his life on the spot. And if he cannot do this, he must go away. While Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in Benares, or Kashi. The Mayavadi sannyasis blasphemed him in many ways, because although he was a sannyasi, he was indulging in chanting and dancing. Tapan Mishra and Chandrasekhar heard this criticism, and it was intolerable for them, because they were great devotees of Lord Chaitanya. They could not stop it, however, and therefore they appealed to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because this blasphemy was so intolerable that they had decided to give up their lives. Text 51. The Mayavadi sannyasis were all criticizing your holiness. The Mayavadi sannyasis are all criticizing your holiness. We cannot tolerate hearing such criticism, for this blasphemy breaks our hearts. Purport. This is a manifestation of real love for Krishna and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There are three categories of Vaishnavas: Kanishta Adhikaris, Madhyama Adhikaris, and Uttama Adhikaris. The Kanishta Adhikari, or the devotee in the lowest stage of Vaishnava life, has firm faith, but is not familiar with the conclusions of the Shastras. The devotee in the second stage, the Madhyama Adhikari, is completely aware of the Shastra conclusion and has firm faith in his Guru and the Lord. He, therefore, avoiding non-devotees, preaches to the innocent. However, the Mahabhagavata, or Uttama Adhikari, the devotee in the highest stage of devotional life, does not see anyone as being against the Vaishnava principles, for he regards everyone as a Vaishnava but himself. Did you hear that? I'll read it again. However, the Mahabhagavata, or Uttama Adhikari, the devotee in the highest stage of devotional life, does not see anyone as being against the Vaishnava principles, for he regards everyone as a Vaishnava but himself. This is the essence of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instruction that one be more tolerant than a tree and think oneself lower than the straw in the street. Trinadapi sunichina, tarodapi sihishnuna. However, even a devotee is in the Uttama Bhagavata status. He must come down to the second status of life, Madhyama Adhikari, to be a preacher. For a preacher should not tolerate blasphemy against another Vaishnava. Although a Kanishta Adhikari also cannot tolerate such blasphemy, he is not competent to stop it by citing Shastric evidences. Therefore, Tapan Mishra and Chandrasekhar are understood to be Kanishta Adhikaris, because they could not refute the arguments of the sannyasis in Benares. They appealed to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to take action, for they felt that they could not tolerate such criticism, although they also could not stop it. Text 52. While Tapan Mishra and Chandrasekhar were thus talking with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he only smiled slightly and remained silent. At that time, a Brahmana came there to meet the Lord. Purport. Because the blasphemy was cast against Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, he did not feel sorry, and therefore he was smiling. This is ideal Vaishnava behavior. One should not become angry upon hearing criticism of himself, but if other Vaishnavas are criticized, one must be prepared to act as previously suggested. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very compassionate toward his pure devotees, Tapan Mishra and Chandrasekhar. Therefore, by his grace, this Brahmana immediately came to him. By his omnipotency, the Lord created this situation for the happiness of his devotees. Text 53. The Brahmana immediately fell at the lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and requested him to accept his proposal in a joyful mood. The Vedic injunction purport. The Vedic injunctions state, Tadvidi panipatina pariprashnena sevaya. One must approach a superior authority in humbleness. Bhagavad Gita 4:34. One cannot challenge a superior authority, but with great submission, one can submit his proposal for acceptance by the spiritual master or spiritual authorities. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is an ideal teacher by his personal behavior, and so also are his disciples. Thus, this Brahmana, being purified in association with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, followed these principles in submitting his request to the higher authority. He fell down at the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and then spoke as follows. 54. My dear Lord, I have invited all the sannyasis of Benares to my home. My desires will be fulfilled if you also accept my invitation. Purport. This Brahmana knew that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the only Vaishnava sannyasi in Benares at that time, and all others were Mayavadis. It is the duty of a Grihastha to sometimes invite sannyasis to take food at his home. This Grihastha Brahmana wanted to invite all these sannyasis to his house, but he also knew that it would be very difficult to induce Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to accept such an invitation, because the Mayavadi sannyasis would be present. Therefore he fell down at the Lord's feet and fervently appealed to him to be compassionate and grant his request. Thus he humbly submitted his desire. 55. My dear Lord, I know that you never mix with other sannyasis, but please be merciful unto me and accept my invitation. Purport. An acharya, or great personality in the Vaishnava school, is very strict in his principles, but although he is as hard as a thunderbolt, sometimes he is as soft as a rose. Thus, actually, he is independent. He follows all the rules and regulations strictly, but sometimes he slackens this policy. It was known that Lord Chaitanya never mixed with the Mayavadi sannyasis, yet he conceded to the request of the Brahmana, as stated in the next verse, 56. Lord Chaitanya smiled and accepted the invitation of the Brahmana. He made this gesture to show his mercy to the Mayavadi sannyasis. Purport. Tapan Mishra and Chandrasekhar appealed to the lotus feet of the Lord regarding their grief at the criticism of him by the sannyasis in Benares. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu merely smiled, yet he wanted to fulfill the desires of his devotees, and the opportunity came when the Brahmana came to request him to accept his invitation to be present in the midst of the other sannyasis. This coincidence was made possible by the omnipotency of the Lord. 58. The Brahmana knew that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu never went to anyone else's house, yet due to inspiration from the Lord, he earnestly requested him to accept this invitation. 58. The next day, when Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to the house of that Brahmana, he saw all the sannyasis of Benares sitting there. And we'll stop there. It's a good stopping place. Now we're going to hear what happens between Lord Chaitanya and the sannyasis of Varanasi, Benares. Okay, now's the time for the open mic. Most of you don't have mics, but you have keyboards or devices you can write on. So please share with us your reflections or discussion or questions or whatever you have. Hare Krishna. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai. Hare Krishna Bhakti Hannah.
She says, Hare Krishna, Srila Gurudev. Please accept my humble obeisances. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Were the Mayavadis who criticized but associated with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu not ordinary personalities like the demons who got to be killed by Krishna?
No, they were not the same as the demons. It says, we'll find out in a little bit in the texts, that because they were very strict in their austerities and followed principles, they were eligible for his mercy. So they're not the same as the demons that Krishna killed. Lord Chaitanya came to uplift everyone, even the impersonalist Mayavadis. But they were the last to surrender to him, and we cannot imitate him. We cannot expect that we will be able to convert this degree of sannyasis, ones who are completely fixed in the Mayavad philosophy. Rather, we should be very careful. Mahaprabhu said that Mayavadi philosophy is so contaminating that even a Mahabhagavad devotee can fall down by inadvertently listening to the Mayavad philosophy submissively. So it's extremely important to avoid it, like the plague, like the coronavirus.
Something from Sarva Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Sarva.
He says, Hare Krishna, how do we deal with subtle impersonalistic tendencies?
Within ourselves or within others? We've already heard how you deal with Mayavadis. You avoid them. Within ourselves, if we have impersonal tendencies, then we have to give them up. And how we give them up is by associating submissively with Vaishnavas who are more advanced than we are. These things are given up in proportion to the development of our service attitude. And we mean, service attitude, we mean willingness to do menial service to those who are our superiors in devotional service. There's no other way. You have to serve submissively, menially, devotees who are more advanced than you are. Because only by the mercy of those who are more advanced than us do we get that ability. Those are the ones that Krishna chooses. And also by repeatedly hearing Caitanya-caritämrta submissively. You know, at the end of the book, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami offers his obeisances to his readers, and he begs them to hear with faith and love and without argument. That means submissively, without argument. we can't receive the knowledge unless with argumentative attitude or challenging spirit. Because if we like that, then that's pride. That's the effect of pride. And if you think that you're better than others, and you can't hear from others, and if you can't hear from others, you can't receive their mercy. I mean, other Vaishnavas. So the way to give it up is to avoid or renounce, if you like, the association of those who are tinged still with impersonalism, and seek out and embrace and submissively and humbly serve the devotees who are fixed in pure devotional service. Therefore, in our Mangalacharna prayers, Vande Guru, Vande Ham Shri Guru, Shri Yuta Padakamalam, Shri Gurun. The word Gurun is plural. We offer our respect to obeisances and our humble service to our gurus, plural. What else?
There's another question from Hannah.
Hare Krishna, Hannah.
It says, how is it that we should see all others as Vaishnavas and ourselves as a straw in the street, but then associate with those who are more advanced than we are, rather than just anyone?
Well, it depends on what level you're on, doesn't it? We'll hear more about that later on in this book, and we heard it in the Bhagavatam very clearly in the 11th canto in the Uddhava Gita. If we're kanistha-adhikaris, then we have to be very, very careful and just follow the regulated principles of deity worship and Vaishnava behavior. And the first Vaishnava behavior is to avoid the company of Strisangi, those who are too attached to women and non-devotees. Because the kanistha-adhikaris are not strong enough, they don't know the philosophy well enough to be able to defend themselves against apasampradaya. Therefore, their tendency to be influenced by the apasampradaya is very strong. But if one comes to the Madhyam platform, then by the increase of knowledge, the more depth of knowledge and strength of faith, then one becomes more solidly situated and is less likely to be influenced by conflicting philosophies, especially Mayavadi philosophy, apasampradaya philosophies. And then we worship the Lord with love. We make friends with the Vaishnavas. We are compassionate to those who are less fortunate than us, who are innocent. Generally, that means that they believe in God, but they don't know much about God, and therefore they can't follow. And we avoid the atheists, Mayavadis, atheists, materialistic people. Of course, we sometimes meet them when we go out and preach, but that doesn't. When we preach, we don't accept their association. We don't associate with them in a way that we get influenced by their philosophy or their company. We go to give Krishna consciousness. So the way we do, how do you do that? You rise up from the Kanishta stage to the Madhyam stage gradually. And the Madhyam-adhikari is the one who sees everyone equally. You can't artificially become an Uttama Adhikari and see everyone equally. And if you remember, it says in one of the purports that we just read, it said that the Uttama Adhikari, even the Uttama Adhikari, must come down the Madhyam platform in order to preach. So when the Uttama Adhikari comes down to the Madhyam Adhikari to preach platform, then he can change the world. That was Prabhupada. The Uttama Adhikari, acting as a Madhyam Adhikari to preach, to discriminate who were devotees and who were not devotees. Therefore you heard the word rascal come out of his mouth at least 5,000 times a day. Well, that's an exaggeration, but he was so loyal to Krishna's instructions. Avajananti ma mudha manusham tanimashritam, that those who would criticize Krishna when he came down to when he appears to be a human being on this plane, then that person is a rascal, fool, mudha, dull-headed. So we have to, Prabhupada said, you can't be dull-headed and understand Krishna consciousness. You have to rise up. You have to study the books. You have to follow what they say. You have to associate with devotees. And you have to engage in pure devotional service. You have to chant Hare Krishna, read these books, apply them into your own lives, into your own character, in your own consciousness. Hare Krishna.
Something from Bhaktidug.
Bhaktida?
Bhaktidug.
Oh, Bhaktidug. Hey, Bhaktidug, Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. Long time no see or hear. We miss you.
He says, Hare Krishna Maharaj. The devotees with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were described in a purport to be on the level of a Kanishta Adhikari, yet still later referred to as the Lord's pure devotees. Can you explain how one can be a pure devotee on the neophyte level? Does being a neophyte imply that one still has material desires?
Being a pure devotee in a Kanishta stage means that one doesn't have ulterior motives in one's service. So you can be Kanishta and be a pure devotee if you don't have ulterior motives, if you're not serving for some purpose, to get money, to get away from some difficult situation, to get adoration, profit, distinction. To the degree that you have those motives, then you're not a pure devotee, no matter what you think you are, or what other people think you are. One time in San Francisco, there was a question. Prabhupada was it was a question and answer session, and one of the, I think it was a reporter or somebody, he said, how many pure devotees are there in the movement? And then Prabhupada, his secretary was sitting there. He said, how many initiated devotees do we have now? And he gave him some number. And Prabhupada said, there are at least this number of pure devotees. You know, when we hear the Kanishta Adhikari stage, we're thinking it's low. Kanishta Adhikari is an elevated soul compared to the rest of human society. So we must be very careful, to cast the Kanishta Adhikaris in a negative light. And that's why in this pastime, it's pointed out that because Tapan Mishra and Chandrasekhar could not defeat these criticisms that they were making to Lord Chaitanya, they were considered to be on the Kanishta platform. Not that they weren't pure devotees of Lord Chaitanya, but they weren't strong enough or knowledgeable enough to preach and to convince them of who Lord Chaitanya was. But if the person is a Kanishta-adhikari and serves the Lord faithfully and follows properly, then he gradually becomes Kanishta, a Madhyamadhikari. And the Madhyamadhikari gradually becomes a Mahabhagavat. This is the system. You don't think that a person is a Kanishta-adhikari and therefore he's going to stay there for the rest of his life as a Kanishta-adhikari. No, if he's initiated and he's following the principles and he's doing everything properly, then he will raise up from the Kanishta to the Madhyam and the Madhyam to the Uttama platform. That's the process. Spiritual education. Spiritual knowledge, elevation of spiritual principles and spiritual activity, spiritual science. Hare Krishna. Next. Okay, Rati, Hare Krishna.
She says, Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Tonight we heard a lot about the contaminating association of Mayavadis and the importance of avoiding it. I recently had an encounter with one because I opened a clip which came in my YouTube feed. It was one man wearing orange who looked like a kind of Vaishnava and who showed pictures of our ISKCON deities. So he got my attention for a while, but I had an eerie feeling because something just wasn't right about him. As I scrolled through the clip, I understood that this was a visual example of how Mayavadis even use deities to make spiritual advancement, but in the end they reject them, or so-called merge with the Lord. As soon as I understood that, I stopped watching immediately and felt really bad and also angry that he would use our gorgeous deities for preaching his Mayavadi philosophy. I was also grateful to the Super Soul that he warned me from within. Could you please elaborate on this practice of the Mayavadis?
You just did. You explained it very nicely. That's exactly what they do. Because they're looking for aggrandizement, they're looking for followers, they're looking for money, they're looking for prestige, they're looking for power. Therefore, just like that, the other day we got that, the one devotee was saying, I've heard that there was somebody who can give Raganuga Bhakti in London. And then he elaborated. He said, this devotee says, the Prabhupada came to him in a dream and told him to do this. So then they asked me what I thought. I said, well, it's possible for Prabhupada to come in a dream, but when Prabhupada comes in a dream, he doesn't say anything different than he says in his books. So you have to know, if you're looking for gold, and you don't know anything about gold, then you're liable to be cheated. Somebody's liable to sell you a box of cornflakes for, $75,000 or something, if you don't know anything about it. So it's our responsibility to know enough, to learn enough, to be able to know what the genuine article is. And that's the purpose of reading the books. Even if we're not advanced devotees, if we read the book sincerely and at least theoretically accept that if they're true, then let me read them in that mood and see what happens to my consciousness, see what happens to me if I hear this submissively. And then by doing that, you gradually become elevated, and then you engage in devotional service. But if a person, what I meant by ulterior motives is that a person has another motive. It's not just faith in God. They have another motive. They're like you said, they're using God to get something for themselves. They're businessmen. What can I say? It's very unfortunate that a person would use the form of Krishna to acquire followers, first of all, but second of all, to teach them, to mislead them, that they can actually become God themselves by merging into the deity. That's the influence of material nature. We came here to imitate Krishna, to be the enjoyer, to be the master. All of us, everyone in the material world is trying to be master in some degree or another, in some way or another. It's just, the infinite variety of material desires that manifest all these impediments and roadblocks and alternate philosophies and all the dangerous elements of the material nature. And the whole purpose of it is sense gratification. So you were very lucky, Rati, that you were able to feel that there was something wrong and then remove yourself. It's not that the spiritual master, the acharya, or the senior devotees, they do things for us. They explain to us what to do. They explain to us how to think in Krishna consciousness. But then we have to actually accept it and actually apply it into our own character, into our own behavior, and in our own mentality. Because, what keeps us in the material world is our material conceptions. So our material conceptions have to change. So the spiritual master comes and gives the knowledge by which you can change your material conceptions. But that requires submission, faith, and service. That's what that verse says. Tadvidi panipatina pariprashnena sevya upatekshanti te jnanam jnaninos tatpadarshinaha. So the next verse says that when we receive that knowledge, then we will not fall into illusion again, because we will see for ourselves through that knowledge that all living beings are but part and parcel of the Supreme, or in other words, that they're mine. So that's the gateway, the beginning of this consciousness. It's not that we are automatically uttam adhikaris and see everyone as better than us in the beginning, but we do get if we assimilate this knowledge, we do get an equal vision, and we give respect to everyone. If we know that everyone's a soul and we can see it in the similarities of everyone, according to Bhagavad Gita, and we can see the modes of nature that they're in, and therefore how they do things, how they think, how they walk, everything, how they eat, how they understand things. Then as we assimilate those things, then we become detached from the influence of matter. And then we can change our conception. There's no one that can do that except for us. It's not that it's a mechanical process. It's a spiritual process. And each one of us has that ability as a human, as a soul in a human body. Each one of us has that potential, that capacity to change our conception. But that requires humility. It requires pride. Therefore it says, pride cometh before the fall, because pride prevents the sound from going into the soul. Mental speculation prevents the sound from going through the ear through the mind into the soul. we're always fiddling with it, playing with our mind. It's subtle sense gratification. And that subtle sense gratification doesn't allow us to actually change our conceptions. We're always trying to adjust things to our conceptions. So that's the process of, there's two words. There's orthodoxy, and orthopraxy. Orthopraxy means how you act, and orthodoxy means how you think. Orthodoxy, if you think properly, then orthopraxy, your activities will be proper. That's why it's so hard, it's so important for us to stick to the association of those who are pure and who you can trust. Those in the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his sincere followers, his strict followers, not the Aprasampradayas. They look the same. Many of the Aprasampradayas, we read a whole list of them, Aul, Baul, Sakibeki, Gauranganagari, Sajya, all these things are Aprasampradayas. And as Lord Chaitanya taught Rupa Goswami, he said these are the weeds that surround the creeper of devotion. And when you first plant a seed and it just starts to sprout, you can't tell which is which, the seed from the plant that you're trying to grow. But we have to become expert to be able to see the difference between the seed, the weed, and the real creeper of devotion, and take out the weeds. That's what it means to change our material conceptions to spiritual conceptions based on what we hear and chant. And then as our spiritual conceptions become fixed, then our behavior changes, and then we can be fixed. That's all I've got on that subject for right now.
Rati has one more question.
Okay.
She says, Guru Maharaj, you often quote this verse, the one following the Tadvidi Paripatena verse. And I have been wondering about the last part. Could you please elaborate on the part, in other words, that they are mine? How are we exactly to understand this?
It means they belong to Krishna. Everything belongs to Krishna. Everything emanates from Krishna. Everything is an emanation of Krishna's energies. So when you can actually see that, then you see that the soul belongs to Krishna. And when you know that somebody belongs to someone else, you don't try to enjoy it for yourself. That's called a thief. That's a very simple, basic religious principle that it's taught in all the revealed scriptures. Don't covet. Don't covet another's property. Don't covet another's wife or husband. Covetousness. So when you see that the soul is a part of the Supreme, and Krishna says, and therefore they're mine, they belong to Krishna. If you're given something from a very dear relative or a loved one to use, like a bungalow or something to on a vacation or something, if you're a cultured human being, then you'll take better care of that place than you would if it belonged to you, because it belongs to someone dear to you. So that's what it means. Every soul belongs to me. It's mine. Therefore, it's easy to respect others when you see that others belong to Krishna. But before you get to that ultimate stage of that, you'll have to see those who are disconnected from Krishna through envy and greed and lust and all these and philosophical misconceptions, and they're like crocodiles and Timingila fish in the ocean of this material world. They come to eat us. They have us for breakfast. And the whole thing comes from the renouncing of the desire for sense gratification. We have to renounce the desire for sense gratification. Why? Because we have experience that it causes us suffering. So if we have to be intelligent enough to renounce the things that cause suffering. And we'll stop there. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, everyone, for your lovely questions and reflections and comments. It looks like Abhaya has something else.
It's the last comment from Rati Manjari. She says, thank you very much. It is so amazing that we can ask you all these questions day after day after day. Thank you for sharing your mature Krishna consciousness with us.
It's my pleasure, because you're engaging me in pure devotional service. And not only that, the service that pleases Krishna the most. So I'm the one who's in gratitude to you. Hare Krishna. Sri Caitanya-caritämrta ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. And I'll see you all tomorrow, same time, same place, same station. Hare Krishna.